This is Michael Jackson's private world, and when I say private, I mean the two things he guarded more closely than anything else on earth, his house and his wardrobe. Michael Jackson's life did not begin behind velvet ropes or glass display cases. It began in a small two-bedroom house on Jackson Street, where 11 relatives shared one roof and one dream, and where the boy who would one day wear crystal gloves and sleep inside a French chateau first learned what it meant to want more. Everything that came later, the mansions, the amusement park, the rhinestone glove, the gold bodysuit, all of it traces back to that cramped bungalow in Gary, Indiana. Nothing about that address hinted at the empire that would follow. But inside those 672 square feet, something was already forming, a hunger for space, for spectacle, for a life that looked nothing like the one he was living. By 1969, the family had moved west, chasing a Motown contract and a new identity in Los Angeles. They landed first in a rented Mediterranean-style house on Queens Road, a temporary stop between two worlds. Michael was still just a child performing other people's expectations, still years away from choosing his own clothes, his own homes, his own image. That would come soon enough, and when it did, it would come all at once, on a single night, under bright television lights. Motown, 25, 1983. A black sequined jacket, hand-sewn by his own mother, Katherine Jackson, cropped short so his shoulders could move freely. A single white glove, covered in hand-stitched rhinestones, worn on only one hand so the asymmetry would pull every eye in the room toward his fingers. That night, the moonwalk was born, and so was the visual language that would define him for the rest of his life. The glove alone would later sell for hundreds of thousands of dollars at auction, a piece of fabric and glass that had somehow burned itself into the world's memory. But what people forget is that the look which launched a global phenomenon did not come from a fashion house. It came from a mother's sewing machine in a family home in Encino. That home was Havenhurst, purchased by the Jacksons in 1971, and it was here, not on any stage, that the real transformation began. By 1982, Michael was no longer the boy who first walked through its gates. He rebuilt it completely, adding a second floor, a private cinema, a trophy room, and a recording studio where the earliest demos for Thriller were written. The house became a mirror of what was happening inside him, bigger, more deliberate, entirely his own vision. And it was during this same period that his designers, Michael Bush and Dennis Tompkins, began the 25-year collaboration that would produce the red leather Thriller jacket. A bold crimson piece inspired by 1950s collegiate style and modern punk, with winged shoulders built to make his slender frame look larger than life. Only 2 of those jackets were ever made. One sold in 2011 for $8 million, a staggering number for a costume that started as a music video prop. The same year gave the world Rick Baker's werewolf transformation, a costume so complete it buried the most famous face on the planet under layers of prosthetics and fur. Michael was willing to disappear entirely inside a piece of fabric if the story demanded it. That willingness, to let the costume speak louder than the celebrity wearing it, was the same instinct that would soon lead him to buy 2,700 acres of land in Santa Barbara County and build something no house had ever attempted before. March 1988. Michael Jackson wrote a check for Sycamore Valley Ranch and renamed it Neverland, a name borrowed directly from Peter Pan, a place where nobody had to grow up. He built a Ferris wheel, a carousel, bumper cars, roller coasters, and a private zoo with elephants and giraffes. A steam train named Catherine, after his mother, circled the property on 2 separate rail lines. He opened the gates to sick and underprivileged children who had never seen a carnival outside of a television screen, and he covered the $10 million annual cost without hesitation. Neverland was Michael trying to hand back the childhood fame had taken from him at the age of 5, and at the same time, it was the loneliest, most guarded version of independence a 30-year-old man could build for himself. Here's something worth pausing on. Somewhere online you may have seen an image of Michael seated on a golden throne, dressed in a heavily decorated military-style jacket covered in chains and gold embroidery, surrounded by stacks of cash and towering piles of gold bars inside what looks like a private vault. Nobody can confirm whether that image is real or a recreation built entirely from imagination. What is certain is that the fantasy it sells, a king surrounded by his own untouchable wealth, was exactly the image Michael spent his whole life constructing, on purpose, one crystal at a time. That construction had a name. Michael Bush called it Liberace Goes to War, the idea of fusing flamboyant, crystal-covered opulence with the rigid, commanding authority of a military uniform. Jackson studied European monarchs in museum glass cases the same way he studied blueprints for his own homes, looking for silhouettes that broadened the shoulders and cinched the waist, looking for garments that made a performer look like a king rather than a man in a costume. Every piece his team built followed 4 rules: fit, function, fun, and first, meaning nothing could ever be repeated, no matter how much an audience loved it. That same restlessness shaped his houses, too. Havenhurst was renovated. Neverland was built from nothing. Every home, like every costume, had to be new. The Gold History bodysuit from 1995 captured this obsession at its most extreme, a rigid, sculpted piece that turned Michael into a living monument paired with mirrored sunglasses that hid his eyes completely. It was a costume about legacy, about being remembered as history while still alive to perform it. And it mirrored the same instinct that built Neverland's private, concealed room hidden behind a bookshelf in the main house, a place to disappear completely even inside his own sanctuary. The Egyptian robes from Remember the Time, layered in gold thread for a sand-spinning dance sequence, carried that same royal fantasy in a different direction, trading rigid armor for liquid movement, but chasing the exact same feeling, absolute, untouchable power. Behind every one of those costumes stood a level of craftsmanship most fashion houses never attempt. Tompkins taught himself to solder and sandblast metal just to build a sterling silver crown from scratch. Bush spent countless nights repairing zippers that Michael had torn apart hours earlier during the nightly ritual of destroying his own Beat It jacket on stage, stomping it into the floor as part of the choreography, then handing it back to be quietly rebuilt before the next city's show. Even Michael's stage shoes carried the same obsession with function over image. He refused to let anyone polish his worn Florsheim loafers because polished leather meant less grip and more risk of a fall that could end an entire tour. Every piece he wore, like every room he built at Neverland or Havenhurst, was engineered first and beautiful second, purpose hidden underneath the shine. Not every chapter was about spectacle. The white shirt and black pants from black or white stripped away every trace of royal ornament on purpose, because the song argued for unity, and the wardrobe had to argue for it too. The plain institutional uniform from They Don't Care About Us removed the icon entirely and left only the man and his protest exposed. And the torn, tattered shirt from the 1996 Earth Song performance mirrored a planet falling apart in real time, sweat and fabric and exhaustion all becoming part of the story. These were the moments when Michael's closet and Michael's life were both under the same kind of pressure, and both responded the same way, by stripping down to something raw. That pressure caught up with him in 2005. Michael stood trial, and though he was acquitted of every charge on June 13th, something inside him had already changed. Investigators had searched Neverland room by room, and afterward Michael announced he would never live there again. The carousel stopped turning. The Ferris wheel went still. The sanctuary had been entered, and it no longer felt like home. What followed was a period of drifting that shows up almost nowhere in his wardrobe, because there was almost nothing left to perform for. He stayed as a guest of Bahrain's royal family, living quietly in villas with his children, away from every camera. He moved to County Westmeath in Ireland, renting a home near the Grouse Lodge recording studios, walking country roads without a single lens pointed at him. For the first time in decades, Michael Jackson was not building a costume or a monument. He was simply trying to be a father in a rented house in the rain. By late 2006, he was ready to return to America, choosing Las Vegas, a city built entirely around spectacle, which suited him more than anywhere else on Earth. He leased a Mediterranean-style mansion on Monte Cristo Way, then later moved into the property that would become known as the Thriller Villa, a 7-acre compound with a private chapel, a hidden art gallery, and gold leaf detailing throughout. It was here, planning a possible residency, that his final music video wardrobe appeared, the dark tailored jacket and fedora of You Rock My World, a quieter, more mature echo of the smooth criminal suit he had worn nearly 2 decades earlier. The silhouette had softened, but the instinct to command a room the moment he walked into it had not dulled at all. His last home was a rented French-style chateau at 100 North Carrollwood Drive in Holmby Hills, 7 bedrooms, formal ceilings, mirrors lining the walls for late-night rehearsals ahead of the This Is It concert series. It was not the most personal house he ever lived in, but his children still found small ways to make it feel like one. A chalkboard in the kitchen reading I Love Daddy that Michael refused to ever erase, cereal bowls lined up along the counter each morning, a father sitting with Prince, Paris, and blanket, not as the king of pop, just as their dad. The formal house shrank for a few hours each day into something small and human. Michael Jackson spent his entire life building 2 things at once: a house that could hold him and a costume that could disguise him, and by the end, neither one was really about luxury at all. They were both attempts to build a place safe enough to simply be a person in. The clothes outlived the man, scattered now across museums and private collections around the world, but there is one detail no auction house will ever sell. Sewn quietly inside the jacket Michael Jackson was buried in is a small figure of Tinkerbell, a private piece of Neverland stitched into the very last thing he ever wore. A final, quiet reminder that behind every gate, every glove, and every mansion, all he ever really wanted was somewhere that felt like Neverland, and someone dressing him who understood that. From a 672-square-foot house on Jackson Street to a 2,700-acre kingdom in Santa Barbara. From a mother's hand-sewn jacket to a jacket worth $8 million at auction, the story of Michael Jackson's homes and the story of his closet were never really 2 separate stories at all. They were the same search, told in two different languages, one written in bricks and rolling hills, the other in rhinestones and gold thread, both built by a man who spent his whole life trying to construct a world big enough and safe enough to finally rest in.